terms of the key driver for our discussions, it's about delivering mana whenua. How does a situation where there's joint ownership or via an independent organisation deliver mana whenua?
That would be for mana whenua to speak to. This is simply set out as an option for the council to consider. The purpose of this report was to set out as many of the available options as we thought would be appropriate for this meeting. It's not for me to comment on that.
Thank you. Also, another question looking at the resolutions there on page 28. Looking at D, does that restrict what's suggested in E? Because E provides an additional ability, but will there be any restriction in D, basically to deliver E?
Through the chair, no. D would simply be the transfer to the foundation, as council has done with the other parcels of land that have been transferred to the Elms Foundation. So with no sort of guidance to consider further the relationship with your Tamataha Trust.
So E just provides some guidance.
Yes, that's correct.
Great, thank you.
If I can just supplement to that, D, in the terms of council's previous gifts of land, is there a condition that, for example, says if the Elms no longer wants it, they must return it to council?
Yes, I don't have that in front of me, but it is some sort of restriction on the land being held for that purpose.
Yeah, through you, Chair, to staff. If I understand D correctly, once something's been gifted, the Elms would be free to consider doing anything they like with the land. So what does E add that D doesn't already give?
So through the chair, D does come with conditions, which would be on terms of similar to the previous sale and purchase arrangements the council has had with the Elms Foundation, in terms of the land being used for the foundation's purpose in perpetuity, or coming back to council should it not be needed for that purpose. Whereas E would allow the Elms to consider a non-gifting to the trust. That's the main distinction there.
Supplementary, if I may, my understanding would be that if the Elms Foundation, having received the land as an unencumbered gift, believed it was in the best interest of the Elms to establish a relationship with the Otamataha Trust, then they would be free to make a gift to the Otamataha Trust with some reciprocity around lease on that basis. So I come back to, it seems to me that D provides exactly what E provides.
Through the chair, D would not be an unencumbered transfer to the Elms Foundation. There would be terms around that transfer similar to council's previous transfer to the Elms Foundation. So those previous transfers did not allow the Elms Foundation to on gift or enter into other arrangements with other parties, whereas E would allow that.
Just the question to the Acting Chief Executive, and then I'd like to indicate, Mr. Chairman, that I would be prepared to move something. Given that we are 1 month away from a new council being probably sworn in, and that if this became an election issue and a council was pretty much a majority of either for or against on this issue, would the new council still have an opportunity to revoke any decision we make today or amend it, or would the deed be done and it would be basically unable to be changed going forward? I just thought that might be interesting information.
So through the chair, I understand it's a matter of weeks for it to be exercised if that decision was made today, so it would be done prior to the election.
Thank you. Question to Bridget. So we know that the Elms would want to develop the site. If they weren't the owner of the property, or they're only a part owner of the property under any of these arrangements, would that have implications for them to borrow money to develop the site? Do we know if they need to borrow money against the value of the property?
I'm not aware of the details. My understanding was that their funding arrangements had to be shored up before council would consider a transfer of the property. That was a term of of an earlier resolution of this council, and I'm not aware of any requirement to borrow against this property should it be transferred to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the current setup, has the Elms Foundation borrowed against any of the land parcels which it currently owns?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't asked them about that, but there's nothing on the titles that would indicate that.
Thank you. I didn't hear the Chief Executive's response to Councillor Baldock's question. Would you mind repeating it, please?
Can you hear me now, Councillor Mason?
Yes, thank you.
Right. So the answer to the question in terms of the exercise of the option would be it would be a matter of weeks, so it would be able to be completed prior to the election.
Just so I get the right understanding, would a new council be able to revoke whatever decision is made today? Thank you.
Depending on the decision, if the decision can be actioned prior to the election, in which case it wouldn't.
Okay. Now, Councillor Baldock, I had intended to move something, but it will allow you to move, but if it fails, I have an intention to move C. So
Sure, if it fails, obviously we'll be back to square one,
Yeah.
but I would like to move A and B.
Councillor Clout.
In speaking to it, and I won't speak for too long because this has been a long process, but every resolution so far passed by this council is consistent with this resolution. The things that we have sought for clarification at the request of elected members have been delivered to us. The last one, you know, the first decision was yes, subject to consultation. Then, you know, yes, but we need to hear from the Elms. The Elms have now very clearly told us, however, to remove any doubt, the board endorses the transfer to Aotearoa Trust with leaseback. It satisfies the Elms requirements. We didn't make a decision last council meeting because there was questions about information that wasn't in the report. That has now been fulfilled. There is everything in there that relates to this decision, and I personally have not come across anything that would change my position in saying this is something we should support, not because of what the Elms wants, but what we believe is in the best interests of the city. And I think moving forward into a better relationship with the mana whenua of that historic land is the best thing for the city. And in time, I believe we'll see even greater cooperation between the Elms and the mana whenua of the area as we have seen a change in the Elms' attitude over the past 10 to 20 years, where they've stopped just seeing it as a place of European history. They've begun to understand there's a lot more there, and that this is what's happening in our nation all over, that we are finally understanding our history better and working towards a better recognition of that together as a people. So I won't say any more than that till the right of reply, but I hope that we may do this. It's consistent with what we have as a majority been saying, and then the matter can be decided and all parties can move on.
Tēnā koutou na rangatira o Tauranga Moana, kanui te mihi ki a koutou katoa. look, this is a great opportunity we have today. If we make this decision that I believe we should, what we are doing is signalling as a council and as a city that we understand and we enter into a very positive and forward-looking relationship with tangata whenua. And it's happening all over Aotearoa, and it's a movement that I think we have to embrace as a council and move with. We have to look at the positive aspects of it. You know, so many people look at, the fears of what's going to happen if we gift this land to O Taumataha Trust. But in my view, there's very, very little to fear, but much to gain from this transaction if we go ahead. And I also remind everyone that this has nil impact on the ratepayer financially. We are going to be gifting the land anyway. It's just a case of who we are gifting it to. So the ratepayers of Tauranga Moana do not need to be concerned. This is something that we should do, and I believe we need to do it today. Thank you.
Through the chair, we're looking at changing times, I believe, and we as a council we can lead or we can follow, and I believe that we should be leading. Anybody that understands our history, that have studied it to any length, would have to support this, I believe. Going forward, what a lot of us don't understand is that, for example, 40% of the young children in the wider Bay of Plenty under 15 are young Maori. The Maori with their forestry, their kiwi fruit, their farmland, their steam resources are going to be powerful partners in the near future. Not only that, but they're also going to be the best partners we could possibly have. One, to look after our environment. They're the best keepers of the environment. And the other one, to look after our cultures, our combined culture and our individual cultures. The Maori are the very, very best partners we'll ever have. A lot of other people that come into this country aren't concerned too much about our environment, and they're not too concerned about our culture. So it's absolutely critical that we do partner with the tangata whenua as we go forward. And this is absolutely the right thing to do, and it'll be a shame on this council if we do not do it. Thank you.
I speak against the motion, and if it fails, it would be my intention to move C. This council honoured a commitment to tangata whenua over Chapel Street during this triennium, and that was a result of commitments made to tangata whenua. When this land was purchased by the council, the definite idea was that it be gifted to the Elms Foundation. A series of hoops was set up for the Elms Foundation to jump through, and when they did, it didn't happen. The concept of gifting it instead to the O Taumataha Trust with a long-term lease was then brought about. During the deliberations, a very interesting minute from the Elms Foundation wasn't perhaps, shall we say, highlighted to council, and I believe that the mover of the motion at that time, who said that subject to endorsement to the Elms Foundation, the council would gift it, if he'd had his question answered at the time, he probably wouldn't have ever moved that, and I think it would have been different results. So I think it is important to honour commitments on all sides of the fence, if you like, to put it that way, and I believe the right thing for it is to go directly to the Elms Foundation, and it is not as though the Elms Foundation doesn't have a representative on it from the O Taumataha Trust. That might not be there is a direct connection, and so that's my position on it.
Thank you, Your Worship. The site, not just 11 Mission Street, but the entire Elms site is really key to the beginning of a relationship between tangata whenua and Pākehā who were coming into New Zealand at the time. And it's really where our city began. Some people can talk about Pukehinahina afterwards, but really this is where that original relationship began. In terms of some of the arguments put against the transfer, one has been around the ability of the Elms Foundation to borrow against the land. If you look at the transfer of the other parcels to the Elms Foundation with the requirement to offer back, if the Elms Foundation ever decided to borrow to an extent where it got itself into financial trouble, and then our Tauranga history was then subject to ownership by a bank, that would be very, very interesting. In terms of the 11 Mission Street parcel, I note there's been some concern about building across boundaries, but the Elms Foundation's own plans show their desire for a centre on that piece of land is entirely contained within that land parcel. Now, sure, plans can change, but again, I think that reduces the strength of that argument considerably. I do support the transfer of 11 Mission Street to Otamataha Trust.
Thank you. As I said last week, I'm going to stick what I said. One, I will not be supporting this recommendation. Don't get me wrong, I'm not supporting the recommendation to the Elms either. My recommendation is recommendation F, and it simply says the council either gifts or leases the land at 11 Mission Street to an entity which represents the interests of both the Elms Foundation and the Otamataha Trust. Thank you.
The problem with that, Councillor Granger, is that I can't see that delivering mana whenua, which is the whole aim of this exercise. So I definitely wouldn't support your alternative. But, you know, looking at the history of this decision, I did support in principle that it goes to the Otamataha Trust. And then when it came to decision time, after reading the report, I felt it wasn't very clear that it was supported by the Elms. And unfortunately, an important letter of the 20th of May, where the Elms stated its primary position was that it takes ownership, led me to make an amendment to make it subject to the endorsement of the Elms. That has subsequently come back. But along with that letter that we received, that's its response to the endorsement. While it did endorse it, it also reiterated that its primary position is that it takes ownership. So I put a lot of weight on that. And I don't want to force the Elms into any relationship that it's not ready for. So unfortunately, I can't support this motion.
Can we put the clock on, please? There's a lot of passion, and my position is still that there are two questions before us, and this question here is easier to resolve than people think it might be if we separate and get clarity about what we're trying to achieve here. I just make the observation that there's something about those two chairs there, that desk, that for whatever reason, when people arrive there to give us some insight or expert opinion, for some reason, that chair, and maybe it faces the political leadership in some way, and people feel there's an obligation to get into politics and leave their professionalism a little bit aside, means that people sitting at that chair are inclined to, how can I put it, give up a little bit of their soul somehow. And just to give you an example, outside this discussion, but to reinforce it, we recently had Alistair Jones of the University of Waikato make a statement about some work the university had ostensibly done around modelling a marine centre on Sulphur Point. When challenged, it turned out that they hadn't effectively done something that could be considered as modelling, and in fact, under a little bit of a pressure, the assertion of a marine centre modelling became an apology that he had over-exaggerated which I thought was slightly overly contrite. But the point was made. Claims were made that perhaps under scrutiny and in the cold light of day, and I've got a lot of respect for Alistair Jones, I'm sure he wouldn't have made, but in this environment, people start moving into grey places to achieve what they believe are good ends. In that regard, unfortunately, I believe that Vincent O'Malley strayed into the same place. And I'm going to give...
Yeah, people are going to have different points of view, but I think we've got to show the courtesy of all speakers and listen to them and not interrupt.
I'm going to give the evidence for that. Vincent O'Malley made a very strong argument for the concept of sale and asserted that Archdeacon Brown was happy to recognise that Māori had rights to access and use the land. But the reality is, from Brown's own diaries, that he argues and states the opposite. He makes an observation around Māori planting potatoes and talks about how he told them no, and that he actually had the seed potatoes uplifted and removed. He makes further reference, and it's in historical documents. When Māori attempted to fence off some of the land, he made the point that no, it's not. So what I'm talking about, I suppose, is that we're in a situation that, you know, the evidence sometimes never comes with a full balance. It's something got me into politics in the first place, the fact that we never seem to have a balanced discussion. And I note also that the so-called trust and the obligation to Māori was forgotten by the CMS when they subdivided their 247 acres at a tidy profit and sold the Elms and 31 acres to Brown. Somehow they forgot about the sacred trust they had and who actually owned the land. There's an inconsistency here. We have historians, just like other people, who have a position, and we just need to sort of be clear here. There's another observation I'd like to make in regard to this, and that is we are repeatedly informed. I mean, you know, the relationship between Tangata Whenua and others did not start with the Elms, and it will not end with this discussion. People talk about the negative impact on council's relationship with Tangata Whenua, but I think one of the biggest issues this council has generally is the way it breaks promises to all sorts of people, including Tangata Whenua. And I would counsel...
You're about at your limit. So
okay, thank you. I would counsel people to be careful about doing deals with people who would break promises to others, because they may well break them to you, right? We need to, in my view, vote against this motion. We need to revoke the previous decision, and we need to move forward keeping our promises. Thank you.
Because if there's any...
Yes, please. I think that the point made by Councillor Plout and Kerry and I've got the names here, and of course Councillor Larry is sorry, a little bit early in the morning, where I am. So apologies for that. Yeah, so I think that they made very, very good points. But I think so. Rather than repeat them, I would just like to say that I think one of the big issues here is that people tend to make decisions based on their emotions, and then they justify by logic. And I think this is an incredibly good example of that, where particularly the people against this motion and in the wider public, the split in the public that has occurred, you hear all about all the things that could go wrong. There's lots of reasons why this is a problem, or that could be a problem, all the ifs and maybes that the people against this motion are saying. And I think it really goes to a mindset. I think it goes to a mindset that is still rooted in colonialism in Tauranga, and I'm very sad to say that colonialism is alive and well in Tauranga. Is a deeply conservative perspective where people are not willing to give up the power that goes with colonialism. I think many of the people potentially who are against this notion perhaps were brought up in times where people didn't want to share power, and that's what colonialism is all about. It's the effect of power on people against their wishes, and I think that has happened throughout our history. It is changing. I think things are getting better, but the mindset to some extent is still there, and I think that is what our leadership as a council, as a councillors, is all about. It's about letting go of power and moving into partnership. That's what this is all about. And going into partnership is saying things like, yes, there might be problems with governance of a piece of land or an entity. There may be, things that we have to work through, that we don't quite agree, or we don't see each other's perspective. But that's what leadership's all about, is by taking people along with you. And I believe that the Elms Board has shown leadership by giving a steer. They're trying to steer in the middle part to some extent. But they have come back saying that they do endorse the proposal. And if they didn't, they would be very, very clear that they didn't. So I believe that the councillors in this decision should vote for the motion because it is about going forward in partnership. It's a principle, and I think that it's deeply symbolic for our community. And by not voting for it, it is the councillors are saying, well, let's go back in the past where our power as a governance is all important and it's less about partnership. But I think at the very least we should give strong credence to Councillor Bill Granger's perspective as well, because that's also rooted that, and I admire him for coming forward with this. With F, is that it is about partnership. It's about doing things together, and that takes risks. But risks in a situation like this will come up with very strong dividends. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Mayor Greg. This is a really tough decision. I'm really torn, and if I could abstain, I would, because I've got my head saying one thing and my heart saying the other, in Uru versus Manawa. And this is, Councillor Clout said, this doesn't have a financial impact on the ratepayers, but it's about what we told our ratepayers, our 55,000 household ratepayers, what we were doing in 2006. We have come a long way in our relationship, and I think if we bought this land now, it would be completely different, but we didn't. We bought it in 2006, and we told those ratepayers at that time what we were going to do with that piece of land. So from my perspective, I would be happy with either D or E, but I will be not be supporting transferring it to the trust, and that's very reluctantly.
I agree with Councillor Brown's comments. The intention was to use the ratepayers' money to purchase 11 Mission Street with the intention of gifting it to the Elms Foundation. It is regretful that the Elms minute of the 20th of May was left out of the council report, and I won't make any assumptions why it was not in the report, but it has created a lot of unnecessary angst, I suppose. It should have been in that report, so I don't support what's on the table at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank Dr. Robson for his historical perspectives on things. But whilst he anguishes over this decision, I refer to what he wrote in the voter guide in August when he submitted his 150-word profile statement. I oppose extravagant museums, so I guess if he's elected there'll be trouble in the next LTP, but I oppose giving 11 Mission Street to the Otamataha Trust, and I do not understand how he can sit here with any integrity today and not recognise that that is predetermination, and he has not been opened, but that is for another day.
Order, Your Worship.
Point of order.
Point of order. The councillor and the council have received and sought advice on the accusation of lack of integrity and predetermination made by the councillor. The advice is that those accusations don't stand. I would ask the councillor to withdraw the accusation and the attack on my integrity.
You do. Councillor Baldock.
Withdraw, because that is a legal opinion and I do not have to agree with it. Any reasonable person reading that would assume that the councillor has made up his mind and is out there campaigning with a very fixed position. I do not resile from it. It'll be your decision.
All I can say is that each council has voted on this at least once or twice, so I think people do have opinions and they're entitled to have an opinion. But, yeah, so carry on with the...
Thank you. I shall continue. Much is being made of this promise supposedly to the Elms in 2006-07 and the comparison to the promise made in 2005 regarding Chapel Street. But I make the point, and I'm very proud of the fact that we unanimously kept that promise after 15 years, but it fails to recognise the fact that we have moved on as a society. You know, 3 decades ago, Nader Glavish was sacked for answering a phone and saying kia ora. And when we last debated this, it was Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori Week, which drives, I think, Don Brash nuts. But we have moved on as a country. And the relationship that the Elms trustees have with mana whenua has also moved on. And council's relationship with iwi here has moved on. So there is no need whatsoever to pin everything on keeping our promise to the Elms. The Elms have made it very clear that they are prepared to support the decision that we have been previously making, and some are trying to dance on the end of a pin to find a way to not do what is the best thing and the right thing, I believe. Councillor Granger has some merit. If this fails, he has some merit in his proposal, because whilst there's not much mana enhancing in that decision, it doesn't remove mana either. The decision to give this to the Elms will take us backwards in this relationship. It removes any sense of mana from this whole process and is an insult, I believe, to those who have made, I think, the most eloquent submissions through this whole process and have convinced many of us to stand true to what we originally agreed to. So I urge those who are struggling with this, Elms promise thing, look, don't stay in the past. I'm afraid the Mayor seems to want to live there, and I'm not prepared to stay with him in that regard. We must move on as a society. As Councillor Malloy eloquently explained, the future is a very, very Maori-looking future in this country, and it will be good for this country because some of the brightest talent coming through are the young, thank you, rangatahi. And it's the relationship we have with them that will take us all forward for a more harmonious and beneficial and prosperous future, I believe. I think I've probably said all I should, and we will leave it to the vote. But if the revocation goes through, we still have to decide then what after that, and I'd certainly be prepared to look at what Councillor Granger is proposing as perhaps a mechanism by which we may still pursue this further and find a way forward that does the best we possibly can. It's not the ideal by any means. I've made it clear what I support. It should be this decision today, but we'll see where we go.
Okay, so Councillor Mason, I'll take your vote first. You voting for the motion or against?
I'm voting for the motion.
Okay. And others voting for the motion, if you raise your hand. So Councillor Morris, Baldock, Clout and Malloy. Okay. And then those voting against, myself, Councillor Brown, Councillor Curak, Councillor Granger and Councillor Robson and Councillor Stewart. So that is lost. I'm going to move C, that we revoke the resolution. It is based on the fact that we didn't have all the information at the time that the mover of the previous motion that Councillor Curak, had he been in possession of all the information, would not have moved that. I think that was obvious. And so I have a seconder in Councillor Curak. I've spoken to it. Other speakers? Councillor, yeah.
Sorry, Your Worship, Mayor. Would you also be wanting to move a next stage, or otherwise?
No,
it's gonna
I'll
be
go
another-
A and C, and then see what comes out of that. Yeah. No, it hasn't. No.
So Mason's been cut off. Can we dial him back in, please?
Yeah. So that's A and C. Councillor Curak, want to speak?
Yes, for all the reasons that has been explained before. But I would like to take this opportunity to apologise to the Elms for my comment at the meeting that I made. I made a comment that it was a cop-out by the Elms for not stating a position and just staying neutral, because it was important to me to know where the Elms sat and its comfort. So I do apologise for that, because when we were provided the 20 May letter from the Elms, that clearly stated a position. So I do apologise to the Elms for that public comment.
Because Councillor Granger.
So, again, just for my clarification here, you said A and C, because on here it says, and if C, D will be included, so you're not including D.
Oh, the idea of if this does pass, then someone will have the opportunity to move any of those others, and someone has signalled they already wish to, but if that fails, then, we will just keep going till we get, we'll hopefully get we will try. If we don't get a resolution, we don't get one. Other speakers? Okay, so I'm going to put that to the vote. So all those in favour, raise your hand. There's myself, Councillor Brown, Councillor Curak, Councillor Robson and Councillor Stewart. And Councillor Granger, you're not voting on this one to revoke? No.
I think I'd rather abstain on this one, because the thing is, I thought that this would have included D, not just C.
Well, that's what comes next. It's called logic. Yeah, yeah.
So I'll abstain on this one.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an abstention. Okay, those against. Okay, Councillor Clout, Councillor Baldock, Councillor Morris, Councillor Malloy and Councillor Mason. Which way are you voting? Yeah. So that's 5 all, is it? In that case, I will vote for the motion, and so that is carried. So that is revoked, and now I'll entertain an alternative motion as to what happens. Councillor Robson?
I thought Councillor Granger indicated he had something on to move.
Even though you didn't vote on the other, which really was important to leading up to this, but yeah.
Your Worship, I would like to move D, and assuming I get a seconder, I will speak to it. D. The motion? Thank you, Your Worship. There is little point in me speaking for long, because I think the arguments have been well traversed. And, the videos are available. the issue for me is, I suppose, at one level, if this fails, I would be happy to see the matter lay on the table until the next triennium. And the reason I'm saying that in the context of this motion is that we appear irrevocably split. We have been round and round on this, and sometimes democracy produces a divided house. It is not unusual in democracy for there to be a divided house. It's one of the challenges of first past the post. It's been part of New Zealand's history. And indeed, it's why we went to MMP, to try and get to a situation where we had more representativity, less division, less minority leadership. So I suppose in a sense, while I sincerely believe that what I'm moving is the right thing to do, I do so pretty well knowing that, as has already been made reasonably clear, that sincere people hold sincerely held positions. It's not a case of, impugning people's integrity for being consistent or not being swayed by one's arguments. I find that unacceptable. The idea that we can't have genuine difference and resort to ad hominem attack has never been my favourite way of working. I think it serves us poorly to go to that place. We do need to find a way of working together, but if we can't, we may need to recognise that there will be a different 11. Some may still be here, some may not, but I'm certain there will be a different 11. At least 3 faces will change within 3 weeks, and hopefully they can find the hopefully they can actually and thank you for the levity. The humour is important here. We are all human. Hopefully they can find the majority required to make a decision so the city can move forward in whatever way that decision takes us. But in all honesty, for me, it's always been the principle. The thing that brought me into politics was the fact that I felt the leaders of the city were not honest with the community. The principle of honesty drives much of what I do and argue for, the principle of transparency. And also, though, underpinned by the kaupapa, that the kaupapa, underpinned by the kaupapa of respecting difference. Yeah? And I think that's really, really important. So I commend the motion. I will try not to speak too long in reply.
Just simply, it honours the intention of the purchase. And also, as has already been said, the Elms minute of the 20th of May supporting this. I don't believe that this proposed resolution honours the original intention of why the Elms Mission Station was set up, which was to minister to local Māori. And by passing this resolution today, Council is foregoing an opportunity to lead. I do acknowledge what Councillor Curac said about the Elms position. I wouldn't characterise their position in this chamber and in public as being uncomfortable with the transfer to Otamataha Trust. Because by doing that, by saying that the Elms Foundation would be, not comfortable with that marriage, in effect, it's
that would be an indictment on the Elms Foundation, that they would not be comfortable with that marriage. And if they were not comfortable, then are they there, then it gives rise to accusations of, are they there just to preserve a nice wedding venue? No. And I don't believe that we should impugn the Elms Trust by ascribing those as statements to them with respect. I do hope that this fails and that Councillor Granger is then able to move because that at least gives us an opportunity to continue this journey forward, because the resolution on the table slams the door, in my view, on mana whenua. And that is not right. It is morally not right.
Councillor Kurak.
I think Councillor Morris's reference to the letter of the Elms and it not implying that it's uncomfortable entering into a relationship with Ultimate Taha Trust. I think basically it has a preference. It's just stating a preference. So what you just said actually leads perfectly into what I would support, and that's E. If the Elms Foundation is comfortable, and I agree with what you said, they probably are, then if E is passed, then it will do the right thing, as you've said. And that's why I will oppose this motion. This motion restricts the Elms from doing something which is right and honourable. And I look forward to moving E if the opportunity arises.
Thank you. There's a very good scripture in the good book which says that a house divided against itself cannot stand, and that was referenced by Councillor Robson. So good on you for that. And I think it is a real shame that we've got to this point. And even looking at E and F, I can see that there won't be great unity of decision making on either of those either. So I'll be voting against this. We need to continue to go forward, as I said before, in a positive, progressive light with mana whenua, particularly at the table. And so I can't accept this at this point. I'm also concerned that F will water down any sort of mana that would be proposed. So I'm really struggling now as to whether E or F, either of which, would actually be a positive step forward. But I'll be resisting this particular resolution.
Well, I originally supported it to go to the Elms Foundation in its entirety. I would be comfortable to support an E, because it's our job to find a way to work together and to move forward, and this has some level of compromise, so I will be supporting E.
Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, we seem to be speaking to other motions that haven't been put yet, but what the heck. I acknowledge what Councillor Kurak just said, but look, the decision about this land is our decision. And thinking that we are somehow doing justice to this, to give it to the Elms so they can make the decision, is not right. This is a decision we should make. And for that reason, I won't support E. I will be supporting F when Councillor Granger, because it just allows a little more time to work through what this option could look like. And for a new council who will really have to own this going forward, to enter into this process. It's better than leaving it lie on the table, I think, but I won't support this motion.
Speakers, Councillor Malloy.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I stood 3 years ago to be a councillor, and one of the reasons I put my hat in the ring again, was to support and grow that relationship that we have with the tangata whenua, our treaty partners. And, this could, and I believe that we have failed them. If if that resolution goes through. We've failed the local iwi and we've failed the local hapu. And this, through the chair, this could well be my last council meeting because if history repeats itself, I'm a gone burger. I'm another yellow card coming up, which will be a red card. But I will leave, if this happens, I will leave this council chamber hanging my head in shame because I've failed in my ambition to try and improve that relationship.
Well, I can only repeat my position that that council honoured a commitment to tangata whenua over Chapel Street, and I noticed nobody said that I was living in the past when I did that. Nobody said, "Oh, you're living in the past by honouring that commitment." They said it was the right thing to do, and now somehow the commitment to give this to the Elms Foundation directly at a similar time, it's all right. We didn't, somehow I'm the one that's living in the past now. So it all depends. I just want to show there's a variety of perspectives on this, and it was very good to hear the apology of the church. But I do note that didn't have any land accompanied with it. It was up to the council to do that, and that doesn't seem quite right to me. So I believe it's the right thing to do in this case to give it directly to the Elms Foundation. That's fine.
Thank you. I will be voting against this as well. I think that what it is doing is simply abdicating our own leadership. We are elected to lead, and we're not doing that. We had a real opportunity when this when the proposal to give the land of 11 Mission Street to the Otamaha Trust. We saw it as a real opportunity to further develop our relationship with Māori, to enhance the mana, and to seek further understanding from our community, to really understand the issues around the past that are so important to Māori, and that many people in the wider population just don't understand. And this debate, if there is a positive to come out of it, has been to highlight those things. And I just hope that some people, instead of taking entrenched positions, will actually seek to understand a bit more. But that's really what we need to do, is to understand each other's perspectives, and that is the way, as a community, we will go forward. So I will support, depending on the debate, the resolution F, but I cannot support this one. And I'd just like to leave people with a thought. What would Reverend Brown want if he was here today? That should be guiding us. He is a person who wanted partnership. He wanted the best for Māori. That's why he was here the first time. That's why he gave his life for the city and for the Māori people. And I think we should honour that spirit behind his actions and everything that has happened. And I'm afraid we're not doing that. We should honour what Reverend Brown would want today. Thank you.
Councillor Grange, do you want to speak? No. Councillor Robson, right to reply.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do not believe that this motion, if carried, slams the door on mana whenua. I was positive about the addition of mana whenua representation onto the committees of this council. I believe it is important. But the deification of Brown I find disturbing. I was baptised in the Church of England. My mother was a Catholic. I spent time in Northern Ireland and watched the Protestants and the Catholics literally at war. My view, and I realise I'm young to be so cynical, is that what Brown was doing here with the CMS was merely part of the ongoing battle for market share between the Anglicans and the Catholics. And if one looks at people's actions and they use that famous phrase, follow the money, it's interesting to note that Brown bought land for himself. And I do note, and have stated previously, the Mayor's comments. You know, there is a role here for the CMS, its descendants, to make good on their claims. And I'm looking forward to that day. I've been assured by Councillor Baldock it's coming sooner than I imagine. I look forward to that day and I will celebrate it. We need to be careful here not to invest too much. Yeah? And while this may be for some a hiccup, I believe that when we look back in history, this will not be a major inflection point for this city. I do not believe when history looks back, this will be a major inflection point for the city. But I do believe that the obligation of this council is to consider the city as a whole, and when it makes promises, to do its best to keep them. And in response to various comments, it's really interesting that in Māori Language Week, when I use the word kaupapa, people tell me that I can't. We need to think very carefully about it when our passions, right, start to override our principles.
Okay, so we'll take a vote. All those in favour of this motion, raise your hand. There's myself, there's Councillor Robson and Councillor Stewart. All those against, there's Councillor Morris, Baldock, Brown, Kurak, Clout, Granger and Malloy and Mason. So that motion is lost. So now Councillor Granger has the next option.
Thank you. Very difficult decisions we have to make here when we're sitting here, not there. I've been there many times watching the people sit here and make those decisions. And I've jumped up and down as well, just like you people. And it is very, very difficult, tell you now, to make some decisions that are very, very tough. This is a very, very tough decision. I could have gone either way. Could have gone either way. Yes, I can, and I'll say that. The purchase of this property was the council's intention in 2006 to pass this property onto the Elms Foundation. I took that on board. Second thing is 11 Mission Street was to be gifted, and we did this a while back to the Otamataha Trust. And this went out for consultation to the people.
Councillor, I'll get you to move because
okay.
I've realised you're not actually speaking to... So you're moving E, I take it? Sorry, F.
I just thought I'd give an explanation before
No,
I
we can't do that.
We'll do that afterwards, yeah. I'd like to move F.
Can I ask a question, a clarification? Is it gifting or leasing, Councillor Granger? Because there's two options there.
Could be either. I'm open for either, and that would have to have further
Either
discussion.
gift or lease. Is that what the motion will be? Yeah. So.
Can I leave both in?
Yeah. Therefore, you would say either gift or lease.
That's what I prefer.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what you're moving, and second by Councillor Baldock. Okay. Carry on now with your address.
Sorry about that. I was probably getting too eager. Just as I was saying, when 11 Mission Street, as we all agreed, went out for consultation to the people. They came back, and I took that on board as well, and there was a 60-40 against. Just remember, I'm here to represent 135,000 of our community, and at times that is very, very difficult. Can't please them all the time. I just think that this position we're in, and it is almost like a 50-50 split, and I'm the person in the middle. I just think now that this here is pulled me into the direction that I think it is the fair way to go, and that's why I'm suggesting and supporting it. So I do hope that I do get some support from other EMs, but it'll be interesting to certainly hear them and what they have to say.
Question, Mr. Chair. I think in terms of proper process, I lack understanding of where Tangata Whenua or the Otamataha Trust, to be specific, sits on this option. As staff pointed out, they can provide no feedback. So how can we decide on this resolution without that information? I need to hear.
The road you went down when you moved the last motion, councillor. So, I mean, I think you'll have to determine that in terms of which way you vote on this motion. And it will probably be going around in circles again somehow. Councillor Bullock as seconder.
Yeah, I support this because of all the options, we at least can move forward to pursuing another way of dealing with this. It's not ideal, and I think the new council coming in will have the time to look at it. They'll have to listen to Otamataha Trust and how they feel about that. You know, there will be things to be explored, but at least it is alive and it hasn't left a bad taste everywhere. I do want to address a couple of things, though, that I hope people will consider. You know, these accusations are made against the church quite often, and I thank Dr. Robson again for his skill in being a theologian as well. The church has a messy history, Catholic, Protestant, all sorts of things, but in this town and in this city, you know, a great breach did occur and a failure which has been acknowledged. And those who say, where's the church, why aren't they giving back their land? I want to tell you that in several months' time they are meeting again. The church has not just made an apology, it is going to come to the table with significant contributions. But they are a big organisation, just like we have time to work through our decisions, and they are working through theirs carefully. So don't use that as an excuse for not doing what we should do because someone else may not be doing what they should do. I believe in time they will, and perhaps this resolution actually is a good thing because we can discuss that with the church going forward, because they do have lands that they are considering, but they also have resources, and maybe we will find a way forward in this. So it's a good pause, I believe. And although I've told you that many times, Your Worship, you still bring up the same old story again, which is why I do think you live in the past a bit. When we talk about the comparisons between Chapel Street, of course, we're forgetting that we asked them to pay for it. All we were doing was actually just simply agreeing to a right of first refusal. They had to come up with, and I won't say the amount because I think it's confidential, but it was well over $1 million. So let's get that in perspective. And we had waited 15 years to honour that promise, in which time the price of the land went up a huge amount, and we didn't let them buy it back at the price it was back then when the promise was made. And let me conclude just by one more bit of information, which I thank Beth Bowden for. When the £200 equivalent in 1838, 1840 was used to purchase the entire block of land here all the way to Gate Parr, it was the equivalent approximately now of New Zealand dollars 22,716, which in 1840 could buy you 13 horses, 37 cows, 303 stones of wool, 99 quarters of wheat, and 1,000 days of a skilled tradesman. You know, let's keep things in perspective. That who would have ever sold all that land off if they thought it was permanently gone for that kind of price? You'd be joking. You'd be joking. We are dealing with complicated aspects of our history, and we need to go forward carefully. I accept Councillor Robson's comments about, you know, this is difficult, we're divided, and we need to try and work this through. So let's support this motion, and let's move into a new term of council Whether we are here or not, let's trust that those who are elected by the community will actually address this with clear heads and come up with something that is taking us forward. Please, thank you.
Look, I mean, this F is very messy in my view. But the only reason I'm going to support this, because effectively what this means is that this buys time for the new council to actually look at it, because that gives such a wide breadth of options within the gifting or leasing. It gives a wide range of options in terms of the percentage of interests between the Elms and the Otamataha Trust. So that's the reason I'll support it, only because and I believe it is now got to the point where this is a new council decision, not this current council, which has not been able to get its act together, unfortunately. And so we just will live to fight another day. Thank you.
Thank you. This whole 11 Mission Street is complicated and it's complex. We've got extensive history, both Maori and European. We've got the church, we've got Reverend Brown, we've got Mana Whenua, we've got the ratepayers, we've got the Elms Foundation, we've got the Otamataha Trust, and we've even had other iwi and hapu present to us as well. So there's a lot of people in this relationship. And now we've had standing orders, and our procedural things that have sort of put some pauses, delays in now, round and round in circles. I do note the word both in there, and I like that word both because it is the two parties coming together. We know there's been a heads of agreement signed, so we know that both parties are prepared to enter into a relationship. So they're getting engaged, if you like, and hopefully soon they'll get married. And I also believe that the new council will be the new council working with Mana Whenua, and it'll be up to them to establish the terms of that relationship, and hopefully they can make it work.
Yes, I'll be supporting this because it allows, I believe, the foundation and the Otamataha Trust the ability to sort something out between themselves, and they'll be able to do something that we've failed miserably at. So I will support it.
Any other people, any other councillors? Councillor Mason?
Yes, I will be supporting it because it's going forward together, and I think it also it's going to take the inevitable pressures that come in the silly season when everybody's trying to establish a position with the voters and making long speeches about things that they hope the voters will attach onto and all the rest of it. But I think that it does. It enables the conversation to continue, which is obviously a good thing. The people who vote for it in the new triennium will then be bound by that, and they'll have to live with the decision, etc. So I think that's all great. There is one other point though that I think hasn't been made yet, and that is about the Otamataha Trust. And I think there is some feeling out there in the community that there's this sort of shadowy group, and nobody really knows who they are, and and there's a bit of that. And I would just like to say that for the past 3 years, Councillor Baldock and I have been sitting on the Dive Crescent Governance Group. And that is a group looking at how the Council and the Otamataha Trust will jointly govern the piece of land to the seaward side of Dive Crescent, because it doesn't have a title. And I've been, Councillor Baldock and I have been sitting regularly with the members of the Otamataha Trust, being Piri Kohu, Puhiraki Ihaka, and Alan Tate. And I am enormously impressed by these three gentlemen. They have got infinite patience. They are very, very reasonable. They are very considered. They're taking the long view. I'm very, very impressed with them. They're good, decent people. This is not some radical Maori group who's going to sell the land and do all kinds of weird things and, go and stir things up and all the rest of it. This is nothing like that at all. These are people that have been here for many, many years. They're going to be here for many years in the future. They're good people to deal with. I absolutely believe that by working together with them and the Elms Foundation, that a good solution can be found. Thank you.
Councillor Kurak?
even though we don't have the full information in terms of the position of the Te Mataha Trust, or the Elms for that matter, in terms of this option, I think, as Max said, Councillor Mason said earlier, that we need to lead. And I think what we're doing here is leading the two and not forcing any relationship. We're leading the two entities to a place that when they're ready to do what's right in moving forward, that it results in a genuine willingness to together deliver mana whenua. And if this happens, then joy to the nation. That's right, that's the point. We're not forcing the relationship.
Councillor Robson?
One of the wonderful things about New Zealand is the treaty. Aotearoa New Zealand has a treaty. But one of the challenges of the treaty is its interpretation. And here we have, I think, a motion which, with good intent, is open to significant interpretation. We have no clarity about gifting or leasing. We are talking about the interests of both, but no clarity on what those interests mean or what the best way of establishing those interests is. This is not, in my view, a good motion. It lacks clarity. It lacks, in some ways, to me, clear direction. I think to call it leading is, I think is an over-exaggeration, to use a phrase that I've referred to earlier. But I'm also conscious that life is short. We do need to try and move forward. And in the spirit I believe it was intended, I think Councillor Baldock made a good point, that clearly there is no ability to make a definitive decision if one sees this as a sort of a yes, no, right, wrong issue. We're not in that space. I don't think this is the best way of keeping that open, but I think it looks like it may be one that has majority support. And so in that regard, I will abstain.
Councillor Stewart, did you want to?
Thank you. Just, I think Councillor Robson raised some good points. It's not clear whether it's gifting or leasing. The term that comes to me is a bugger's muddle, which I don't like to use, but it's, I don't think Clause F gives much clarity either.
Yes, I sort of see it as it's just a continuation of what's become a bit of a fiasco in terms of making a decision around this issue, and it's not been the subject of any consultation either. So I'm not sure how it's going to proceed, so I'm not in favour of it. Other speakers? Councillor Morris, did you want to? Right of reply, Councillor Granger?
Hey, thank you. First of all, I just want to thank all the people again for coming here and spending your time to come in and listen to what we have to decide. And you can see that the council is very difficult, and sometimes we do get these split decisions, and we can't please everybody all the time. A pause, as it was mentioned before, it probably is, but I just feel where we're at right now, it's just the better way forward. It's a start. It's just, as I said, it gives the opportunity for those parties to explore a little more. And I think that's very important, because right now we're not. So it's just one step, I think. I know there's several steps after that to take, but I just think it's the right step first for those parties to explore again, discuss things again. And I think that is important. Thank you to the M's. I'm sharing your points. And we'll just see what decision give.
All those in favour of the motion, Councillor Mason, what's your position? Just so I...
Voting for the motion.
Voting for it. Okay, so if you raise your hands, Councillor Mason, Councillor Morris, Councillor Baldock, Brown, Kurak, Clout, Granger and Malloy, and against myself, Councillor Stewart, and abstention, Councillor Robson. So that is carried. So it's whichever way, at least it's good that a decision has been made. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, the only other items are approving minutes and confidential. We'll just to allow, we'll just have 15-minute break before we come back to do that. So, thank you. So we're resuming the meeting, and it's now time to go into confidential. Would somebody care to move? Moved by Councillor Brown, and seconded by Councillor Malloy. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, so that's carried. So we'll now need to